Yes.
Isn't there a possibility that people will want to be in this reality world instead of the real world?
There's going to be a certain percentage of people that absolutely that will happen. It's already happening. There's already, I don't know if you've read about the phenomenon in Japan of young men having virtual girlfriends that are on their devices. This is a full trend that's going on. They take them out for dates with their friends. They introduce them to their friends. They never have an actual relationship. They only have a relationship with a virtual girlfriend. This has been going on for the past couple of years in Japan and is an increasing trend that's going on because dealing with virtual reality is kind of easier than dealing with, messy humans, right? So, yes, this is one of the great dangers of this, that we have to make it about interconnectivity and communication with each other. I also believe we have to make it about physical environments, having events where we can have what are called mixed reality experiences. We're actually talking about planning one for the Palais next year, where we actually have a big masquerade ball where you can come in, you can be in VR, you're there actually in real reality, and you're seeing things on screens, seeing things in headsets, and they're able to have different identities at the same party simultaneously and have a new gestural language that allows you to communicate with each other in VR as in a different way than you're able to do it in actual reality. Again, these are social experiments. We have to do the experiments to find out how humans want to use this stuff. And I think we constantly have to be telling stories about the dangers because there will, and look, there's no way that's not going to happen. There's going to be people that completely submerge themselves in a virtual reality, especially, see, one thing none of you have actually seen it. If you were actually able to see the most sophisticated virtual reality right now, you would be going, oh my God. It is really, really compelling. You feel like you're there. There's one of the demos with the new Oculus Crescent Bay system, which is their most advanced system at the Oculus company, is you're standing on the edge of a skyscraper. And you're hearing all the wind, and it looks absolutely, you just absolutely feel like, and you walk up to this edge. Now, intellectually, when I was doing this, I knew there was a floor right there. I had to force myself to put my foot out because my autonomic nervous system was telling me, don't jump. And that's how powerful it is now at the point where in the VR industry, we call it, we've achieved presence, where you actually have presence. And it has to do with technical issues like achieving under 20 millisecond transport latency. What that means is when you move in VR with your headset or walk forward with it, the latency of the image moving with you is under 20 milliseconds. And when it's under 20 milliseconds, the brain thinks you're actually there. Then there's the resolution of the images themselves and the veracity of the images. That combined with under 20 millisecond transport latency in the current versions of VR have created this feeling of presence, that you are actually in another dimension, another place. And that can be a very realistic dimension, or that can be a very abstract dimension, depending on the artist that's curated it. So I encourage any of you that are interested in this to find, there's a new VR company here in Denmark. It's going to be everywhere soon. So it's going to be easier to get a hold of than you probably think at the moment. But once you really start to experience it, you'll see that a lot of the things I'm talking about, why I'm talking about them, because the power of it is something that I believe is beyond any medium we've ever experienced before, and so the stakes are high. Yes.
You also said that those soldiers had
PTSD. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, really dangerous in a way. I mean, don't you think you will see some restrictions?
Yes. And that's why I believe that it's important for those of us that are in the industry and creating content to create our own ethical framework for content right off the bat. And matter of fact, I'm pulling in standards organizations. I'm pulling in tribal elders, because one of the things VR, it turns out, I mean, this is a much bigger conversation, but it turns out that virtual reality interactive narrative has less to do with cinematic language. As a matter of fact, it has very little to do with cinematic, because in cinematic language, I'm able to cut to the close-up, pull back, go here, cut to you, and that's very manipulative. In virtual reality, it's just immersive. It's much closer to the tenets and the structure of tribal ritual. than it is cinematic language. So in a way, I'm looking backwards in time to more ancient forms of storytelling to find antecedents that connect to the mechanisms we can use in virtual reality. So I was in Australia, living there for 5 years and doing a few films there, and I got involved with the Aboriginal people, and they have a ritual called corroboree. And this is a ritual they've been doing for a very, very long time. And the Aboriginal people, when they've been studied by anthropologists and archaeologists, they were the only people on Earth that didn't have war for a 50,000-year period. And there was a reason for it. They had rituals which exacerbated that idea, which exacerbated the energy of war, that we're not killing each other. And one of them was this ritual called corroboree. And I was in the middle of this ritual in the outback in Australia, and I realized that I was experiencing the most intense interactive media experience of my life, but just no technology. So the tenets of that and the structures of that really started to inform me in my process of wanting to create the new ways in which we can actually tell interactive stories. So one of the things Hollywood is doing is this is one of the reasons Hollywood 1.0 is dying, is that they want to go, but we know how to tell stories. We're telling you a story. We're showing it to you. We're shoving it down your throats. That's what Hollywood does. VR is completely different. And the culture around it is completely different. The culture of the people that are doing it, they want to have agency. They want to be empowered to create. And that's one of the other aspects that I think is really important in this, that we have to empower people to create in the context of these new mediums, so that they're not just a passive audience, but someone that's engaged, and actually engaged in their physical bodies as well. And so I'm bringing in a lot of somatic movement specialists to work within the context of this, because doing what we do with these devices, we're literally hunching ourselves over. There's all this study about the sedentary human and how these devices are actually making us like this, and so we have to be very aware of these things and all the multidisciplinary approaches when we get into a medium like this, which means it's got to be a lot more rigorous as a process than developing a Hollywood movie. It's got to be something where we engage a lot more disciplines. So, okay. Any other questions?
But how far is the technology when you don't use the device or whatever? There's this clip on YouTube where there's a lot of kids sitting in a big hall.
Yeah.
And then there's this whale coming down.
Yeah.
It just looked like total reality.
That whale was created by my friend Alex McDowell that I mentioned earlier. It's a big project called Leviathan, and it's a mixed reality experience where they have it over their heads in the hall. That was at the CES show. And it's involving both. They used both devices to look at it and then in the actual room itself. So keeping things in this idea of mixed reality, I think, is very important. We don't want to get stuck in the box. Being completely just isolated in the box is, to me, a frightening concept. So I want to try to create projects that have aspects that are constantly involving actual community, people getting together and having a community experience together using these technologies. Because the thing is, the technologies are happening. They're going to be out there, and there's a huge generation that absolutely wants them. That's going to happen. So we have to push it as creators in a certain direction. And for those of us that are mentoring young content creators, we have to take the responsibility to mentor them in a direction that at least engages people in a positive way.
But don't you think that the U.S. Army are way ahead of many of you? I mean,
they are and they aren't. It's a really interesting thing. I actually just came back from Washington. I was in Washington, D.C. about 2 months ago with Shannon, and we met with DARPA, CIA, all these people, because I'm a thought leader in VR, right? So they wanted to hear about VR. And they are using it. They have technologies that are more sophisticated, but they don't understand storytelling. And the truth is, a world is something that humans need a story, need some kind of emotional connection to in order to truly engage with. And there are people in the U.S. military that I think are looking at this for very nefarious reasons, and there are those that, and we met with a few of them, that are looking at it from exactly the opposite perspective. I can only say that going to Washington, this is the first time I ever experienced meeting with people at this level of the government. The American system is breaking apart, basically. It's breaking down, it's dissolving. The experiment of representative democracy is sort of over, and a new thing is happening. And what that new thing is going to be, I have no idea really, but there are people in the traditional system that are looking to create positive things with some of these technologies. So I literally was told by one of the people at DARPA, there's a light DARPA and a dark DARPA. And this is someone who was one of the heads of DARPA, who was at this gathering. So, whether they're lying to me or not, I have no idea, to tell you the truth. All I can do is go by my own instincts, and these people seem to want to create something. So we're actually creating a television series that's around these ideas of there being a light DARPA and a dark DARPA. So getting it out there, getting out the idea that there is these other layers of government that people don't know about, and getting that out into the actual public mind is something that some people in the government seem to want to do in America right now.
Okay, last question. Do you think that 15 years ago the technology was that far ahead that you could fly 2 airplanes into tall buildings, and make it look like real? Do you think the technology was there 15 years ago?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they never found anything from those planes.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Some things that were said at this meeting with these people verified that.
Oh my God.
And one of the things they said is one of the guys who was the head of DITRA, which is anti-nuclear proliferation for the DoD, his wife had put this gathering together. She's a screenwriter, and he's a major in the Army. Very interesting people. And they brought this very interesting group together to listen to some crazy Hollywood hippie director. And so I'm there and I'm talking to them, and he starts talking about the fact that Dick Cheney and the Saudis planned 9/11 in this bunker that was just down the street on Embassy Row from where they lived. Then a month later on CNN, we're seeing this 28 pages of redacted, exactly that came out. I mean, we heard exactly these things before they came out in the news. So, I think it's absolutely probably the case that that was a false flag operation. Yeah, and that these things are, that's the way that certain people use technologies. It's just human nature, unfortunately. That's why we have to tell better stories that get out there and enlighten people about the fact that these other realities are happening. In a way, 9/11 is essentially a virtual reality. It's one that was created to be a version of reality that people think is true when it's not really all the layers that are there. What those actual layers are, I don't know if we'll ever know the true, absolute truth about it, but I don't think we know even half of what really goes on. That's my feeling, anyway. So this has 7 GoPros that are all pointing in different directions, and then you take all this into a program that allows you to stitch it together. No matter which way the camera's looking, it sees he's in one, so they'll take down his middle, they'll find a place to stitch it, and then you basically find the places to stitch the images together, and then you get this 360-degree spherical video around you that when you put a headset on, you're able to turn around and look everywhere and see it. So here, you're not going to see it that way because we don't have headsets. But
you can show that to the next picture.
So that's without moving it, but now I can pan
See-
around.
so if you have a headset, you'd be able to look around and see everything around.
There he is. You can look up, you can look down. Here's the stairwell.
Look up.
You can look around here. And he's overlaying on there, so. And so this is.
I haven't seen this yet.
Oh, now we're up here?
Oh, nice.
Oh, when did you sneak up there? Not a part of the deal.
Oh, wow, look at this. moving.
Yeah, you can see the sketching is done really quickly. So, you know.
See where this, he goes through, that's where the stitch is, yeah. So that gets modified so you can't see it when it's finally done. Yeah.
No.
I like all the old men on the walls watching. It was a great location. So in the music video, it's a global human masquerade ball, and people from different parts get a notification on their phone. They come there, they're given masks, and then as the evening goes on, as the song goes on, the masks turn into VR headsets. And then they're interacting with each other in VR where their bodies are merging together. So you have like 3 people that become one person, things like that. Because in VR, the idea is that all the boundaries between us can kind of dissolve and we can experience each other in a whole different way.
But it's worth trying.
Yeah,
Do you have it? Is it working?
Most
Yeah.
people here have an iPhone.
Yeah, okay, cool. So you can move your phone around. So move it around in 360s.
Hold it sideways.
No, it's just then we all start the song at different times. But
Yeah.
I don't mind.
But it's VR.
Yeah.
Exactly, anything goes. There are no rules yet. That's what I like about it.
So the music is
So
also
like
kind
turn around in your seat. The best way is like
Yeah, so
maybe
turn
sit
around, you'll
down,
see different, you'll see,
stand up and walk
just
around.
by turning the phone.
yeah, just by turning the phone, you see all the different directions. See, so imagine that phone is in a headset, and see, as you're turning, you're seeing all the different directions in a headset, see?
So it's using
And you can look all the way behind you, too. Go all the way behind you, 360
using
degrees.
the camera.
No, it's
See?
using an accelerometer in your phone
Okay.
that can tell what you're doing. It's actually a
Okay.
gyroscope in your phone. Yeah.
Okay.
It's so cool. You have so many different images.
Actually, so this one.
Well, that's the thing. The idea is that you
And
can,
you can look away when you get tired of looking at me.
and you look somewhere else.
More interesting to
So
look at
if
you.
you don't
actually.
have the YouTube app, it won't work. But you have to.
I like the dancers better.
No, but look at this, how they do it.
But
And the thing that's unique about this is that, because this is just one aspect, we're actually made a real music video, that's normal music video, simultaneously with the 360 one that has concepts in it that relate to the 360. So what we're doing is trying to connect the dots between traditional medium and the new medium so that it gives people an education of what this is. No one's really done that before. No one's connected the two things and made one thing reference the other. So it's a very self-reflexive music video. It's a very self-reflexive project because we're trying to put out the idea of VR, how it can be used, and also this idea of the global human. That's going to be part of this idea of people being able to connect together in a different way and showing that. And those effects are going to be mostly in the traditional music video, where the 360 is something that goes with it that expresses in what we can do now, because the only thing we can do now is use 360 in order to make virtual reality. Like next year, we'll be able to make one that is using these new light field cameras that I talked about, and that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing. So we're in this first phase of VR right now, and it's going to become the next phase over the next year or so. And in the 360, there's going to be a window in the 360 that's showing the traditional video, so that the things going on in the 360 are relating to what's happening in the traditional video. So again, trying to connect the dots and get people to understand what the new medium is. And so it's an opportunity to do that right now because no one knows, very few people know. And yet, there's more money going to this medium than any medium in history. That's the thing, that's the irony. You know, and there's not much content. So it's really good for those of us that want to create content because there's literally people want to, are looking for things to put up on their sites. Yes.
It was a question for you.
Yes.
Since this is a union thing, where do you see jobs for our kind of union? We're usually doing TV and film.
Well, all the things that go into making a film or a cinema, all those crafts relate to this craft, but there's also more because there's other aspects, other technologies, other disciplines that have to be brought to bear to make real virtual reality. As an example, making story worlds, like creating a story world, very much a team sport. As a matter of fact, this idea of a singular director, the sort of auteur theory of directing, will not be something that VR really is open to because it takes so many different people, so much detail in order to create a VR story world that it really is a group activity, which for me is one of the best things about it because I love collaboration. So being able to collaborate with a lot of different people from a lot of different disciplines and bring that to the creation of a story world is going to be one of the great joys of working in the medium.
And for business opportunities or for small startups, what kind of education should people take around?
Well, this is the great thing. Basically, get as much gear as you can, and the gear has now become fairly affordable, and just experiment. This is the thing. There's no rules yet, so it's a time when, especially young startup companies, can just start experimenting with things, and they could suddenly become the company that creates something that's really starts to define the medium. So it's a really great moment for entrepreneurial advancement right now in the medium because also there's a lot of money chasing it because a lot of people realize, and it's money from outside the traditional Hollywood environment. It's money that's coming from all the other different sectors and people that want to seed things that are really about the future. The people that want to be part of creating the future, that's the kind of money that's coming into this. So it's very much outside the traditional entertainment structures that are funding this.
But not TV, I guess.
Well, again, I'm doing a series that's also connected to a VR game. The people I have doing the VR game with me is the Rogue Initiative, and they're the same people that did the Call of Duty games. So literally the biggest games made ever. But they're now pioneering in the area of VR gaming, which is very different. They're the ones who did that experiment with the gun on the table they talked about, and to show okay, it's not the same thing shooting somebody in VR than it is in a game, because a game is such an abstract thing. This is so much, it tells your brain you're really there. So it's a much more, I think it's a good thing, because it doesn't desensitize us to the violence. It actually creates something where the violence has a real impact. And I think a lot of other mediums have desensitized us to violence, especially gaming. And so it's the same rules aren't going to apply. It's a very unique time to be in part of something where I can imagine back in the beginning of cinema, it's thinking about, let's cut this shot together and this shot and see what happens. That's what we're doing now. We're actually just experimenting with this medium and seeing what are the most effective ways to express with it.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I think this was, you said there were no scripts, and it was a completely different universe. I think this must change the acting, the ways of acting.
Very much so.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's going to be even more subtlety. Because you really feel like you're there with the person. So it's almost like being intimately in the space with a person. And so the ability to be just a human being that's being, even if you're creating something that's a stylized character, is going to be more and more important. And even with AI characters, and we're looking at creating AI characters, actors are going to be very, very a part of that. Because I'm actually, one of the things I'm doing is trying to get actors to work with coders, so that coding people can connect with the emotion that actors understand and be able to put it into the code. And that's one of the biggest challenges with the medium is bringing together what I call unholy alliances. People that don't usually, or strange bedfellows, people that don't usually talk to each other or work with each other have to come together and really do something in a different way. It's kind of like NASA, you know, it's like where they had to put some man on the moon. They had a lot of different kinds of scientists. It's not that crazy, but it's getting that in that direction. As a matter of fact, I just visited the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is in Pasadena, and they're doing a lot of things with virtual reality, and I'm engaging some of those rocket scientists in the process with VR too, because we need their understanding of physics and things like that in order to create some of the things we want to create in VR. So it's a really different medium, and it's much more challenging and much more complex than any before it. So the idea that, you know, Hollywood will be able just to click over and start making VR is not what's going to happen. It's going to be smaller companies, other companies that are coming on from the outside. They're going to innovate, and then Hollywood will come around and buy it all, as they always do, because they're basically banks. That's what they're doing. So I'm going to show you now the little teaser. This is a teaser put together of images from other films and some unique images that was used to sell the idea of making Lawnmower Man Reborn, which is the follow-up of my film of 20-some years ago that introduced the concept of virtual reality. Now that virtual reality is real, we're going to make a film that takes those ideas to the next step. We're also going to be making the film in story worlds first, so VR story worlds that people can experience in a non-linear fashion. And then the film comes along and kind of connects the dots like a thread. Sort of the mythology of it is what the film will express. So, but the first thing that will be there would be the virtual reality components. So here we go.
Sometimes I think I've discovered a new planet, but what I'm inventing instead of discovering pure energy.
On that now. So, any other questions?
I'm just very interested in the technical aspects of like how you edited it and how you because that's gonna be
well.
I can see how you film it with you can use GoPros or whatever you have.
But that's the first phase of VR that's happening now. The way we're going to be making all the things I'm doing, apart from a few smaller projects, I'm not mostly focusing on 360 cameras. I'm focusing on using light field cameras that are going to absorb the data of an environment, and you'll be able to then actually walk around in it and navigate yourself through it. So really what it is it's creating code that allows there to be a procedural environment that renders itself in real time. So everything is created in real time. Are you familiar with what procedural is? Procedural, there are procedural games. What's the famous game?
Sky.
What?
No Man's Sky.
There's a game called No Man's Sky,
It's not even out yet. It's coming out. Yeah.
which is going to come out that is about, that utilizes a procedural world, meaning as you're entering the world as a participant, it's being created by the things you do and by the way in which you interact with it. It's not there before the next moment that you get there. So it's procedurally generated, meaning it's in real time. It's not actually something that's put on a piece of tape, put on a hard drive. It's something that is alive as an environment. And that's the way real virtual reality will be done. It's not, there is no cutting. You're actually involved with, by interacting with a character. That interaction with the character will then create another part of the procedural world that you'll then go and explore with that character. So it's all creating in a completely different way. That's when I say tribal ritual is more related to the idea of this, because there's something in tribal ritual called shamanic guidance. Like shamans take people through the idea of a cosmology in a tribal ritual. This is, you're going to have ways of shamanically guiding people through a virtual environment and virtual world. And those things are sometimes going to be AI oriented. They're going to be audio oriented. They're going to have visual cues that allow you to be drawn in. But it's about guiding in a way, the idea of a Greek chorus from Greek theater. All these things have sort of a veracity for exploring ways to allow people to explore a story world, because it is really exploring. It's discovering things that you're a part of creating. So you feel you're a part of the creation of it. So let's say, here's an example I often use because people understand the genre. You're in a James Bond movie, all right? And let's say you're in a virtual environment of a James Bond movie and you're in the casino. And James Bond is over there and he's doing his casino thing and there's a lot of beautiful women around, beautiful men and all this. And you're there, but you're the waiter, all right? And you're watching that linear story of James Bond. You're seeing things happen, but then you're starting to flirt maybe over there, if you're a female waiter, with a guy or a woman or whoever, whatever your proclivity is, you're flirting with them. And they come over to you and they either slap you or they go, come with me, or based upon your interaction with them, this AI character takes you into the back. You might have some erotic experience with that AI character, and then suddenly you're part of the bad guys planning the skidoo chase that's going to happen in the linear narrative down the line with James Bond. So what you're doing in cinema theory, it's called off-screen space, where we explore off-screen space is the real estate of virtual reality, whereas in cinema, it's the things we don't show. We have to not show a lot of things that the audience is aware have happened in order for a cinema story to work, because cinema is a shorthand medium. You tell it in shorthand. In virtual reality, it's an extreme longhand medium. So you can still have that linear thread, but you're able to decouple from the time of the linear story thread, go and explore off-screen space, these other tangential areas, and then recouple into the linear story thread. So it's this idea of uncoupling and decoupling from time in the context of cinematic storytelling that has a connection to cinema. That's one of the only connections. Everything else starts to be something else in terms of a medium. But that's an example, and I think we're going to be playing with things like this in the context of genres which people understand, because you instantly understand the James Bond genre. You understand what's going on. You understand how to interact with it, and so it allows people to feel comfortable in that story world. And then when they start to explore other aspects of it that become procedurally generated, it won't be completely unfamiliar. And then they're able to then come back to the linear story. One of the reasons I think that there always will be linear storytelling and not branching storylines, there's been a lot of work done with branching storylines where if you do one thing, then either A, B, or C ending happens. I don't think people want that. It's never worked. Those experiments have never worked. People want resolution in a story. They want a story to go somewhere. But they may want to explore the other aspects around that story, sometimes for weeks, and then recouple into that James Bond narrative that's allowing you to get to the end. So it's really about this idea of playing with time in a whole different way than cinema does. That's most interesting. But again, these are what we're experimenting with. It's very early days. So we're just trying to do these experiments to create language around the medium. Yep.
I'm also thinking a little bit the technical side now. So what does it take, if you want, we're not only using this 360, but then the next thing. What does it take in the technical? Can you use a MacBook Pro? You have to be designers. How big is it?
Well, this is the thing. Every consumer electronics giant is putting billions of dollars into this. It's all coming. I mean, there's now 100 different headsets available on the market as of right now. the computer systems that are driving these things are all being designed and sold right now. It's going to get out there. Basically, we have a 2-year period of adoption where there's going to be an adoptive thing. Like a company like Samsung, by using their phones as the driver, they're able to get a lot of traction really fast because a lot of people have their phones. Apple's going to jump into this at some point. We don't know what they're doing. They've been very secretive about their VR thing, so we don't really know. And none of the VR works with Apple yet. Yeah. None of the Apple computers can run VR yet, which sucks. So we all have to go get PCs in order to do VR right now. I'm an Apple guy, so it's tough. It's a different religion, you know. Huh? No, just to see it. Just to experience it, yeah, because VR is driven by PC technology, not Apple. Apple just has not allowed, because Apple's a closed system to a certain degree. It hasn't allowed there to be the ability to use other virtual reality devices with their.
Well, their computers aren't fast enough.
Yeah, yeah.
They would do it in just their like you have to have a super fast gaming computer like PC.
Yeah, the first adoption. The first adoption is happening in the gaming world. Definitely the gaming world is driving it because those are the computers that are able to render things fast enough, and especially when you get to procedural rendering, that's a whole other level of computer. So, but it's all coming down in price. It's all going to come. That's why the next 2 to 5 years is the big adoption curve. Basically, 5 years from now, this thing's going to be pretty ubiquitous out there. And then you have companies like Magic Leap, which are doing augmented reality, where the headset goes away, and it's a much, much smaller form factor. It could be, eventually, they're talking about it being in contact lenses.
Yeah.
When
you talk about this next camera that's going to take
Yeah.
data,
Mhm.
and then you take the data to the computer, is it then you have to have technical staff to do these things?
That's what but right now, I'm putting that staff together. That's exactly what I'm in the middle of right now. And it's extremely multidisciplinary, way more than traditional visual effects or traditional film production. Yeah. It's a daunting challenge.
So it's not a one-woman man show?
No, not at all.
but then actually,
It's a team sport.
Yeah. Procedural allows it to actually build itself to some level.
Yeah.
So you get the data and you have a source
I
of
mean,
data that creates infinite possibilities.
The most important people in this are coders.
Coders, yeah.
Coders are the artists of this medium.
Like DPs would be out of work.
Yes and no, because the creation of understanding light and understanding mood and emotional context, all are going to still be part of it. So I'm using traditional craftspeople working with coders, like traditional art, actors working with coders to create these worlds. Because without that, it's going to have a very technical feeling to it. It's not going to have the emotion that cinematographers and actors and other craftspeople bring. So there is absolutely a collaborative aspect of it that's going to continue to grow.